So this is going to be a little different today's podcast. As you can see, there's no one else here with me, and there's no phone-in guest, and there's no one to chime in on anything. There's a couple different reasons why I'm doing it this way this time, and one of the biggest reasons, obviously, is because of what we're going through in the world right now with this COVID-19. And I don't know when it's going to get back to normal, so I'm trying to figure out another way to continue to do my part and continue to successfully try to grow New Highs and Lows podcast. So what I did was I've been trying to get some feedback from my audience, from you guys, from the listeners, and try and figure out what the best way to do that is. And I think what I'm going to do is try and do it by myself for a few episodes until, we can get back on track. And what I did was I asked, some of the listeners if they can tell me what they want to hear about and what subjects we should cover and talk about on the podcast. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about myself and where I come from and where I grew up. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about old school writing in a way, as much as I know and as much as I can share from my personal experiences, and just SoCal life, life here in the harbor, life here in Southern California. I know you guys are listening from a lot of different places, and I've been getting a lot of recommendations, or a lot of you guys want to hear about SoCal life. So, excuse me. So, I grew up in the harbor. My parents, when I was born, they lived in Long Beach. I was actually born in a hospital in Bellflower, but my parents were living in Long Beach. My dad, he's an immigrant from Mexico, and my mom was born and raised here in Wilmington, California. So where I went directly when I was born was Long Beach, and that's where I spent the next 10, 12 years of my life was in Long Beach. And my father still lives there, still has a home there, and that's where he's at. I had a fairly normal childhood. I come from a good family. Both sides of my family are great. My mom's side, my dad's side. But, I did grow up watching some things that maybe, young people or anyone should really have to deal with or watch. Some abuse, some violence. Not towards me, but definitely in the household. So my parents split up. I was maybe 11, 12, 13, something like that in that age. And my mom moved to San Pedro. So we moved to San Pedro, and I lived there for about a year. Kind of a rough part of San Pedro. I lived right off of First and Gaffey, or Santa Cruz, in that area right there. So, needless to say, we've seen some things we shouldn't, and we experienced some things that we shouldn't there. So we moved to. We then moved to Lomita, and my mom, met someone, and a good man, and we ended up kind of all three of us living in a house in Lomita for a while. Well, not for a while. My mom actually still in Lomita, and that's where she and my stepdad, live now. But so I lived there. Most of my teens went to school in Lomita, Harbor City. And we lived in a couple different places in Lomita. I ended up living in Harbor City for a quick minute, early on in my life, early, late teens, early 20s. I ended up, having a kid young, and I'm not going to go too much into that part of it right now, but, I lived in Harbor City for a quick minute, uh, ended up living in Torrance for a minute. I've lived all over the harbor. So during those first few years in Long Beach, I went to school in Carson. All of my elementary school years were at, Dolores Street School in Carson. And I got to know a lot about Carson. I took some classes and played football at Scott Park in, the late 80s, early 90s. So I know a lot about a lot of different places in the harbor, and I feel close to the harbor. But a big part of my life in the harbor was in Wilmington. Now, although I have never lived there, I've spent quite a bit of time there. I do have family that's currently there, and my mother grew up there. My grandmother grew up there. My great grandmother lived there. So many generations there, as well as in East LA. I have family that still lives there, and I spent a lot of time there as a young kid, and even now I'm still there quite a bit. And I've never actually lived there. Well, I lived there for a few months, and recently actually, but I can get into that another time. So the harbor is a big part of my life, and growing up here has been really fun, and I've gotten to do a lot of things that people normally don't get a chance to do. I spent a lot of my time on the beach, bodyboarding, boogie boarding, I guess you call it. I got involved in making cars go fast. Volkswagens, muscle cars. I worked on some friends' muscle cars with them. I got into low riding. It's kind of difficult to I guess you know talk about all my life all at once. I've lived almost 40 years. I'm going to be 40 in 4 days. My birthday's coming up. But, you know, living in Carson, I got to see quite a bit as a young person. Growing up, going to school there, I got to see a lot as a young person. Living in East LA, being in East LA a lot, I got to see a lot as a young person. I had Whittier Boulevard 3 blocks from my aunt's house. And, I got to drive by that arch, that Whittier Boulevard arch in East LA. And I got to see a lot of iconic things. So, from living in the harbor, and then getting married later on, continuing to live in the harbor, went to Torrance. Here in the harbor, it's a different way of life. It's a port town. We have the second largest port in the world, third largest, something like that. And it's not a very big place. So you end up meeting and getting to know a lot of people. And there's a lot of families that have been here for a really long time, generations and generations. So the feel that you have, it's kind of a small town feel here, I think, in a way. And everybody's connected somehow or knows somebody somehow. I said it's a port town, so there's longshoremen. Longshoremen are a big part of the energy and the livelihood here. There's a lot of union, it's union strong here in the harbor. And, you got the beach, which is, 5 minutes away from anybody, 10 minutes away from everybody here in the harbor. You have downtown Los Angeles, which is, well, with traffic, you're looking at an hour drive, but it's very close. Basically, we're at the end of the 110 freeway. So where the 110 freeway ends, the Harbor Freeway, you take that all the way to till it ends south, and that's where we're at in the harbor. And I don't know. I mean, the harbor's broken up into a few different cities. People say different things. I think it's Gardena. I think it's Torrance, Harbor City, Lomita, San Pedro, Wilmington, Carson. I think Long Beach is part of it. I mean, some say Dominguez. I'm not really sure. I don't make the rules. I don't have any decision. I'm just saying what I think is kind of the harbor. Some people say it goes all the way out to Lawndale and Inglewood. I don't know. But, I've spent a lot of time here, and I've seen a lot of different lowriding here. My extended family, my step family, my stepdad's family, they they have a really close relationship with lowriding. They've been in the Pharaohs for many years here in the harbor, the OG Pharaohs, and I got to see that at a really young age. One of his brothers, one of my stepdad's brothers, he does upholstery. So I got to really check that out. In Long Beach, where we lived, there was a guy who lived next door to me, and his name was Steve, and he had a mini truck. I think I mentioned this story before. He was in a car club called Moving Violations, and he had a mini truck, and I would just, run over there every chance I got to see what he was doing to his truck. It was amazing. I mean, he had like 10 15-inch speakers in the back of the bed, and he had a camper shell on it, and it was all kinds of cool metal flake colors, and it was cool. Slammed on the ground. I think it was a Toyota, if I'm not mistaken. Back then it was either Toyotas or Nissans, it seemed like. So I got to experience that, and I loved it. I loved every part of it. I loved listening to him bump his music. I loved watching him work on his ride. And he had hydraulics, so he would hit the switches, and I loved it. I fell in love with it. So as soon as I was able to, I started trying to get into cars, and I got into cars. I got into Volkswagens first, pretty much. My first car was a Plymouth Valiant, a 69 Plymouth Valiant, and my dad gave it to me. And I love that car, but I ended up getting into Volkswagens. I ended up getting a 66 bus, and I've had a 67, I had a 68, I had a 64. So I had a bunch of them. Did, work here and there, slammed them on the ground. Just, really fun. So that's how I found my way into the car world. And then, later on, as I got older, as soon as I got a camera, and as soon as I was able to get around myself, I started making my way to Crenshaw, and I would go by myself, and I would just try and find cars, and then I would just follow wherever they would go. As soon as the cops would come, and because that's what would happen, even back then, you would go out on a Sunday, and you would just cruise in those neighborhoods, and you would just look for lowriders. Well, that's what I would do, and then I would just follow, and you start meeting people. You start kind of chopping it up, finding out where the different spots are, and you just start following. You just go and you become part of it. That's what I did, and I shot many pictures. I met many people, got to experience a lot of cool things, but it's always been close to my heart, and I've had a few lowriders. I mean, I wouldn't say full customs, but I've some Daytons. One of them had some a pump or two, and just try to do my thing. Eventually, I guess I'd like to get more into it, but I have a lot of different hobbies that are expensive, and a lot of my money goes to other things like that. But so, I don't know exactly what kind of direction to go with this right now. I mean, I know I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. I know I'm going to talk a little bit about lowriding, SoCal life. I also want to talk about the podcast, and what it means to me, and kind of why I got started with it. I was struggling. I'm having a tough, year. My kids moved away, and I don't really have a way to go and see them right now. And, I haven't been able to contribute to them as much as I should. So I don't know. I'm just not able to see them right now for whatever reason, whoever's fault. But I was just getting down. I lost my license. I got a DUI, and I didn't know what to do. So I turned to watching Joe Rogan a lot and a lot of podcasts, and I just started doing my homework, and I just started researching podcasts and how to do them and how to make them and how to build it and what an RSS feed is and the different distributors. I use Libsyn, by the way, and I just started, kind of really emerging myself into it, and it actually helped me quite a bit. It helped me focus my energy on something else, on something other than not being able to work or see my kids or do the things that I needed to do. And it really has inspired, it inspired me. Watching these guys inspired me. And then I was inspired by the guest I was having. And it's been really a good experience, and it's been really fun and positive for me. And I'm trying to keep positive, and I'm trying to stay focused on it. Unfortunately, with our situation right now, it put me off track, and it's becoming difficult to do. And I can't do it in the same way. And maybe it's not as fun for me anymore. Currently at this moment. And I just thought I'd do this episode and really talk from the heart. I have problems and I have things that going on in my life just like everybody else. And I want this to be successful, and I enjoy it, and I love talking to people and finding out stories, and I love talking about lowriding and art and graffiti, and I love all these things that I've been doing, and the people and the guests that I've been having on are what I want to hear about, and hopefully what I want to hear about and what I want to talk about interests you guys, the people listening. It's a different thing, it's something that's hard to explain, having guests come into your home, my home. This is my home, which is my studio. Having people come in here and share themselves with you and share their life with you, and you're listening to them, and it's very intimate, and it's a great experience, and it's very, I don't know what the right word is. It's deep, it's very deep. You're listening to somebody on these headphones, and you're hearing them intimately. They're in your head and you're in their head, and a lot comes out in here. And not only am I getting a lot, but hopefully I'm giving something. And that's what the whole point of this was. It was to share and give and be positive. Well, when you're not in a very positive place, or when you're struggling yourself, it's hard to continue to do that. And it's hard to make and create good content. It's hard to get yourself in that right headspace to want to do this. So that's kind of where I've been. And I missed an episode. I didn't miss it, but there was an episode that didn't, I've been going through a lot. So I recorded the episode. It was me and Eric Jimenez from Uso Car Club, and we did it via phone interview. I ended up doing 3 interviews that day. So this is kind of what happened. There's a missing one. I don't know if anybody noticed, but there's a missing episode. I think it's 20 or 21, or I don't know which one it is. But so I recorded 3 guests. I had Eric Jimenez, Uso Car Club. I had Adam Savader from the Goners Car Club, and I had Tom Ingram of Viva Las Vegas Rockabilly Weekend. So I recorded all of them. They called in. Each one of them had their time to call in. We recorded each segment. It was amazing. They went really well. But there was some hiccups. And because it's a phone interview, the way that it works is I have this Rodecaster Pro, and via Bluetooth, I would connect my phone, and they would call in. So somewhere along the line, something didn't go right. And the end of Eric's podcast was distorted and didn't sound right. And the next two after that were completely distorted and I wasn't able to use. So unfortunately, you guys are not going to hear Adam Saavedra's, and Tom Ingram's. And the last portion of Eric Jimenez, you're not going to be able to hear. So again, these things are just setbacks that I'm not expecting and I'm not really aware of how to fix. And it brings you down, it sort of discourages you in a way. And I'm by myself. I live alone and I don't have a whole lot of interaction with people right now. I'm doing the quarantine thing. I have a weak immune system. I have psoriasis. You guys, I don't know, may see, but I have psoriasis and I take a drug that weakens my immune system. So I've been really trying to not go out as much as I'd like to. And with that comes some depression, I think. You're not able to go out and do the things you want to do. You're not able to go out and live the life you want to live. So, it's hard. It's difficult. But I know I want to do it and I know I have to do it. And one of the things Joe Rogan said that, there's a difference between the professional, the pro, and the amateur. And the pro, he's going to get up and he's going to do it every day. He's going to get up and he's going to force himself. He's going to push himself. The amateur, he's not. He's going to be able to get distracted or he's going to figure out a way to not do it. And I need to do this. I want to do this. It's important to me. You guys are important to me. You guys listening to it is important to me. Getting feedback from you guys is important to me. Holding me accountable, it's important. So, so that's where I'm at right now. I'm trying to figure out how to continue to successfully grow the podcast. I'm trying to figure out how to bring you guys guests that maybe I can do Skype or via Zoom, or I don't know. What I really want is I want to continue to have guests, and I want you guys to be able to see us on YouTube and listen to us on the podcast. That's what I really want to do. And unfortunately, I don't know when this is going to get back to normal. So I'm going to try this, and hopefully you guys can send me some emails. New Highs and Lows podcast. Right, something like that. New Highs and Lows podcast has an email, and it's New Highs and Lows podcast @gmail.com. And you can send, any kind of feedback, any kind of questions for me, any topics that you want. We're also on social media. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. You can check out my personal Facebook, Victor Soriano, or you can check out New Highs and Lows podcast Facebook. We're on New Highs and Lows podcast on Instagram, and you can check that out. And you can also DM me and ask anything that you want to talk about or anything you want to hear about. I'd really like to figure out how to make it more interactive, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. And that's kind of where the podcast is. Something else that's coming up new or that I'm going to try and do is I'm going to do this trivia. I'm going to do a trivia giveaway. So Sullen Art Collective, they're going to sponsor one of the episodes, and they're going to do a giveaway. We're going to do a giveaway, and we're going to do some trivia about some of my past podcasts and past guests. So I'm going to be sharing the details of the trivia giveaway next week on the podcast. But, this is a little precursor. This is a little inside tip. If you guys listen, you guys go back and listen to some of the old podcasts. Listen to all of them if you can, because I'm going to be picking some random trivia from those podcasts, and whoever gets all the trivia right the fastest, the soonest. So what I'm probably going to do is announce the details next podcast, next week, next Wednesday. And it'll give you all the details about what to be looking for and listening for. And then I'll also let you guys know what the prize is going to be. So Sullen the guys over at Sullivan are gonna put together this prize package, and we're gonna send it to you. So the winner of the trivia, whoever gets the most trivia correct, the fastest, is basically gonna win this gift pack from Sullivan Art Collective. Amazing guys over there. So awesome how much they take care of me, and I really appreciate them. So that's something that you guys could be looking out for. Back to the low riding thing a little bit more. Like I said, I watched it. I don't know, here in Southern California, you see it quite a bit. I know other places you don't, but we can just be driving down the street on a Tuesday and you'll see, a lowrider at a stoplight with you, or, it's a little more common here than in a lot of places. But, going to school in Carson, I would see them rolling down the street. I'm sure it was probably Kita. I know for sure it was probably him, because I was playing on a playground where he lived 2 blocks away. So, but I got to experience that. Like I said, I got to experience the Pharaohs, car club, and that's an older car club here in the harbor. So I did get to see it on the mini truck level and that side of it, and that world, the Euro a little bit. And then I got to see it on the OG scale, which is more of the bombs and the older cars. But every chance I got, I would go to a car show. Or my dad had a lowrider. My dad had a couple different lowriders. He had an Impala, and then he had a Malibu that he ended up fixing up kind of lowrider style, with some Kragers, and the Supremes were big back then. And then he had a van. He was doing the van thing before it was a big thing. Before it's huge now, but he was hooking up his van, back in the day. So that was in the 70s. He had those cars. The van he had later on, but he liked hooking up his rides. So I had that in me, as well as my cousin. One of my cousins out in the IE, he just showed me passion of cars. Also my cousins in East LA, my cousin Gilbert, they had passion for cars. They would throw rims on them, and you would hook them, you would put sounds in them, and you kept them clean always. I remember he had a 5.0 Mustang, and I loved that thing, man. The way it sounded, and the way that it felt when you were cruising in it. My cousin in Riverside, anything he had, he would hook up. He had a Suzuki Samurai, I remember, but he kept it clean, and we would cruise that shit, man. La Sierra High School, we would go cruising in that car all the time, lunchtime, man, or after school, try to pick up chicks. We were young. So, I've experienced the car thing on so many different levels. I was destined for it. It's just in my blood. I love it. I love every kind. I love all kind of cars. I love all cars, but old cars for me is just something special about it. The other thing, here in the harbor, and here in the here where I grew up, there's a lot of different neighborhoods, and I know that you guys have experienced that where you're from, probably. Especially if you're here in the United States. I don't know, about other countries, but here, where you grew up, there's different neighborhoods, and people like each other and people don't like each other, and people get along, and some people do get along, and some people don't get along. There's a lot of different personalities and crews. So that was something that I had to manage my way through. I grew up in Long Beach, where we were at. I was in a black neighborhood. So in the 80s, here, growing up in a black neighborhood, being a Hispanic, it just didn't go real well. I didn't, it just didn't, I don't know. It just didn't work. It wasn't the way it was. So I had some dudes that didn't really like me, and it affected me. I didn't have homies, I didn't have people to back me up, or I was by myself. So, I had some problems with some people locally, and it was unfortunate. It wasn't cool. It was rough growing up there. So when you're here and there's so many different neighborhoods and there's so many different people and different personalities, you really got to watch your step, and you grow up knowing that, and you grow up kind of knowing where there's going to be certain people or certain groups or certain, crews that either you're gonna get along with or you're not gonna get along with. And I don't know. I think growing up with that here, you start to learn respect more, and you start to learn the do's and the don'ts. And it's interesting, it's you learn real quick growing up here in the harbor about watching what you say, and learning where you can go and where you should go and where you shouldn't go. I mean, you always have the people that don't like you. You're always going to have your haters, and you're always going to have that person that you don't like. I mean, there's people that rub you the wrong way, people that you don't like for whatever reason. But so yeah, growing up in the harbor, you have to have thick skin. You have to know who you should fuck with and who you shouldn't fuck with. But I've gotten to meet a lot of really cool people, and I've done a lot in my life. Over the course of 40 years, I've experienced a lot, and I've gotten to see a lot of cool things. I've gotten myself into some bad situations, and I've gotten myself into trouble sometimes, but I wouldn't change it. I love it here. It's my home. I love everything about the harbor. I've traveled a little bit and I've been around other places, and I don't know. It's just, there's nothing like it here. You have perfect weather all year round, and I don't know, the people here are just, I think for the most part, we're good people. We're hardworking people. We're family people. And, when you come from the same place, even though you may be from a different neighborhood, or you may, we're all from the harbor area here. And I think that that's something that we should focus on, and try and be more communal. I think that's the one positive thing that we're getting out of this. We're trying to be a little more communal. I think we need to try and get along better, get along more. So, anyways, I'm rambling here. I'm trying to figure out the next route to go. Um, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of there's different kinds of low riding, right? So, I mean, you have modern low riders. I guess you would call them new low riders. I mean, what are new low riders? You got like Lincolns, Cadillac, big bodies, um, G bodies. You got your Regals, your Cutlasses, your Monte Carlos, and then you have your classic lowrider, which is like your Impalas. Um, I mean, your Impala is like your staple, right? I mean, every year of Impala is almost low rideable. every single model of Impala, somebody's putting some Dayton's on. Then you got your customs, which are still lowriders. I mean, it all stems from the same shit, man. It's it definitely all stems from the same shit. And then you have your show lowriders. You have your street cars, your street hoppers. There's so many different layers of lowriding. There's something for everybody. Your classic bombs, your old school, the fleet lines, I mean, and then in the custom world, you can take all those and then you shave the door handles, you French the lights. You know what I mean? But it's all low riding. And as you can see, or as you've heard here on the podcast, everybody has the same kind of stories. You know, it's they got it from their dads or their uncles or a close relative or neighbors but it is a big thing here. You know, culturally here in Los Angeles, here in the harbor. You know, it's everywhere, and a lot of people are part of it in some way or another. Whether it's rockabilly, whether it's, like I said, customs, whether it's modern lowriders or classics, or it all comes from the same place, and we're all the same kind of people. I think here we've just gotten to experience it on a higher level, and maybe more frequently, I guess you would say. And it's an amazing thing, man. Especially now, lowriding here now is huge, and it's bigger than it's ever been. It's year round now. Before there used to be kind of seasons for it, for car shows and stuff. Now, year round, you have lowriding. When I first started going out to Crenshaw, it was a hell of an experience. Being out there and watching people from all these different places coming together because of this common hobby. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a really beautiful thing. I mean, you smell the weed in the air, and you see people having a good time and laughing, and you see cars cruising, hopping, and you see families, and you see friends and homies, just enjoying each other's company, enjoying each other's hard work. And they're taking over a street, in the middle of a city. And when you get there, you almost get goosebumps of watching all these hundreds of cars taking over this main street, and everybody's taking pride in their ride. They're cruising down the street in the beautiful cars, all cleaned and polished and shining and chrome. And then you're just respecting other people. You're respecting other cars. You're checking out other cars. It's a hell of a thing. It's an experience that you can't really put into words. And then you have the camaraderie of, we want to keep doing this, but we can't because somebody's trying to stop us. When you take something like that, when you try to take something from somebody that they enjoy so much and they love so much, it's going to be hard to take it. It's going to be hard to change that and take that from them. It's actually going to make them stronger, probably. And that's what I think is happening right now. Guys like my boy Jay Hernandez, from Dipping Our Way Car Club, man. People like that, clubs like that are so passionate and going to continue to do it no matter what, whether they have the cars or not. That's what it's all about. And then you have that thrill of the cops coming and trying to break you down and break it down and, take it from us. And then it's like, all right, let's go to the next spot. That feeling, of 100 cars scrambling to go to this next spot. And then you better know you better know somebody who's going to that next spot. Because if you don't know, you're going to get lost. And who knows, they might, there's a few different places. And it's just a cat and mouse game, but it's something that it's a good experience. I think it's good, clean fun, to be honest. That's my definition of good, clean fun. If you think about it, there's a whole lot of things that people could be doing way worse. Way, way worse, So, I don't know, we used to go to Greenleaf, and we used to go to, there was a Home Depot for a while. Redondo Beach Boulevard had it for a minute. I mean, Broadway, of course, but it's always been something, Crenshaw. That's some of my experiences with life here in the harbor. I mean, and low riding. Obviously, I'm gonna, I want to get into some other stuff, but please, hopefully you guys can send me some messages. Hopefully, I got my boy Hernan's shirt, engrave it. You guys could check him out. I really want to try and support a lot of my past guests. I don't know how to. I mean, it means so much that they came and they put in their time and shared a lot of their stories with me and with us, with you guys, the listeners. I mean, think about it. Some of these stories that you hear on the podcast, no one has ever heard. And that's a big thing. It's a special thing that those people are doing for us. They're sharing their stories with us. So hopefully you guys listening could, follow them and keep in contact with them and send them messages. And I'm really looking forward to this thing with Sullen. I'm trying to figure out some good trivia for you guys about some of the past podcasts. And it's going to be fun. It'll be really cool. I don't know how I'm going to do it exactly yet with answering the trivia, but definitely brush up. Go and listen to those past podcasts. This joint keeps going out because I'm talking. So, SoCal life. I don't know. I guess it's like life everywhere else. Just different climate. Maybe a little bit faster pace here than some places. You grow up quicker, I guess. You have to grow up, I think, a little bit quicker here. So I think this is going to be it for today's podcast. Again, I wanted to touch on so many different things, but hopefully I did a little bit. They're going to get better. This is my first time doing it by myself. So there's definitely a learning curve and how to adjust. And again, I do want to continue with guests, and I am, but for the next few, I think it's going to be like this. And if you guys have any questions or good feedback, bad feedback, the email is going to be a really good way to do it. YouTube, I'm going to put this on YouTube. You guys listening out there, I have a YouTube channel, New Highs and Lows Podcast on YouTube, and a portion of this podcast goes on the YouTube channel. I never post all of it, so you guys get everything in its entirety. The YouTube, they get a small portion of each podcast, and that's then they can, I'm kind of directing them over here to the podcast. The YouTube videos are a small portion, either between like 5 and 20 minutes of the podcast I put on YouTube. And then some of that, I put clips and stuff on the Instagram and the Facebook. So you guys check out those feeds. Let me know what you're thinking, what your thoughts are. Anywhere in the world, anywhere you guys are at, I appreciate you. I really appreciate the listeners. I could see the numbers, and it means a lot to me. I'm trying to grow this as best way I can, and I really enjoy lowriding, and that's what I'm talking about this episode. But I'm also a photographer. I also work in film. I want to get into all of that stuff. I've had over 50 jobs in my life, from plumbing to construction to, I was a sushi chef. So, there's a lot of things that I want to get into with you guys. I just need to know what direction to go in, and I need some feedback. So, you can do it on YouTube. You can do it on social media, any which way. Just send me some feedback. If you want to ask me questions personally, if you want me to shout you out, I can do that. Let's try and grow this together, and let's try and make this a little different, especially with what we're going through right now. I really want to continue it, and I really want it to be a good, positive thing for us. So thank you so much for you guys listening out there. Thank you so much for everyone that has already, contributed and helped me along with this. Please like, share, subscribe. That stuff is important. I really need that stuff. It helps me grow. It helps the podcast grow. So anything that you can do to do that, my boy Ray and Frank, Working Class, Belching Beaver. My guys, thank you so much for all the love. But this is, Victor Soriano, the host of New Highs and Lows podcast, signing off, and I'll see you guys on the next one.